Good evening, everyone, and Matt, welcome to Kustendorf.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We just saw Drugstore Cowboy, and this film, it was made in the same year that I was born, and so...
Get out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense, but come on now.
Yeah, and
we rub it in.
We both turned 30 this year, and I don't know about myself, but the film still looks great and holds up really well.
You know, that's really nice to hear because you never know. You know, you see films, and do they hold up?
Yeah, so I hope we chose the right film to represent your career.
I'm quite proud of this movie, that I was part of this experience of making this film. You know, I'm quite proud of it. So I was happy when Amir told me that this was the film that they would screen.
And it was Ghassan's first major film, his second film, I think.
Yeah, he had made a film called Mala Noche,
yes,
which was the film that I saw. And I said, wow, this guy's really, really good. And the funny thing was he wanted to meet me and then about the film. And the agents, my agent, we had the same agency. They didn't. He had to win a prize at a film festival before they would give me the script, which was crazy because it was a very good script, I thought, and a very good role.
Yeah, it's a strange film because the junkie gang. It's a romantic film. It's like almost a James Cagney film, but with drug addicts.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we started the film, you know, beforehand, there was a lot of, there was some kickback. There were people that felt it was a film that, you know, I remember there were some people that said, how can you make a movie like this, you know? And at that time in the United States, there was, we had Nancy Reagan, and Nancy Reagan had started this whole campaign called "Just Say No." Right, that was what was happening, and so I think where the film was a sort of a groundbreaking film was that it was the first maybe movie at that time to depict drug use, the euphoria of drugs. And which I think is important because, you know, to show the full story of, well, why do people take drugs? Well, they take drugs to escape in euphoria, and you have to show that. I mean, often you would see films and the depiction of a drug addict was always somebody who looked like they were in so much pain. Well, you know, obviously the consequences of that, there's a lot of pain, but you have to also show the other side of it. And the author of is this okay for you guys? Because I'm speaking in English and okay, good. Oh, okay, that's good. I'm sorry if I'm speaking too quick, too fast, you know. But the author of the book was he was in prison, and had been in prison for 11 years. And I remember Gus Van Sant and we drove up to the prison to sit with him and talk to him about it. And when I met him, I said, Jesus, this guy's like, I was 26 years old, maybe 25 when I met him, 26. And he was so much older than me, you know, he had white hair. I said, I'm too young to play this part, you know, this is like, you know, Dennis Hopper should play this part or something, you know, I was thinking. And then he said to me, no, all this stuff happened, you know, in the late 60s when I was much younger, and the character that Bob is based on was 11 years younger than him, and was a prolific thief. I mean, he was the leader, kind of the crazy one. And he said, he looked just like you. He didn't look like me. And I saw a picture of him, and he did look like me, except he was small, because he could dive, you know, under the counter in the drugstore and really get in there and steal. And, you know, he was a good writer. You know, he wrote some interesting, very interesting books. I mean, I don't know that he was a great author, but he wrote some very interesting stories, you know, from his time in jail.
Yeah, Gus likes to take autobiographical stuff and base his films on it. I think Malanoche is the same.
Yeah, there was a character, I think, in Portland.
Yeah.
He based that story on.
And William Burroughs said somewhere that, about the drug issue and about the film, that it was a film about, to stop against drug hysteria, if not against drugs.
Yeah, that's about right. Maybe. I had a few people that said to me, "Hey man, thanks a lot. My sister's in rehab because of you." And I said, "Hey, that's not my problem, man." But no, I'm seriously, I don't think that was this was not a glorification of drugs, but, these people were very specific, they weren't, I guess, typical drug addicts. They were maybe addicted to the adrenaline of stealing as much, and the heist, as they were the drugs.
And William Burroughs, you had the opportunity to hang out, work with him.
Yeah.
What do you remember about him?
Well, I had met him before because I was friends with the director who made a documentary about him called Burroughs. And I had also, when I was working on a very bad film in Lawrence, Kansas, which is where he lived. He lived in a Sears. I guess in the 30s you could buy a house in a Sears, Sears and Roebuck's. Are you familiar with that? Sears and Roebuck's was like a very big department store, and they sold a lot of things in the United States. I mean, I think they just went out of business now. That's how long they've been around. And you could buy a house in this catalog, and they would ship it to you, right? It was like real. I guess Henry Ford style, you could buy the house, and he lived in one of these houses. And he was always going out with his shotguns. I went and visited him on his property. And, he was I liked him very much. I still, after I made the film, I got a Christmas card from him every year. And I can only find one of them. But I thought it was great. He actually would sit down and write Christmas cards, which is not what you expect from Wayne Burroughs.
You worked with Gus again on To Die For, which is also a great film. So I guess you have a relationship with him.
Yeah, I like him. We've always remained friends. I thought that film was such a good script, but it was the first film that he made that was not a Gus Van Sant film. It was written by Buck Henry, who's a very good writer. And, and I did that because I really liked him as a filmmaker, and I thought it was a great script. And, sometimes it's just great to be part of a troupe of actors and, just work with people you really like.
Yeah, Joaquin was excellent. It was like first, I think, one of the first major parts that he did.
Exactly.
Got really noticed there.
Yeah. And also Casey Affleck.
Yes.
Very young.
Yes. Hoodlum. Yeah. I want to read something to you, which I found.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
It's Pauline Kael she wrote the film critic. She wrote a piece about Tex when it came out. And here's what she said: actors who have labored to learn the rudiments of their profession must want to kill the potential teen idol Matt Dillon, the open-faced young star of Tex. He's a natural who takes the camera with the baffling ease of a puppy.
Well, I know that people really admire Pauline Kael. I don't know. I mean, I don't really read. But I will say that there's something really magical about working with non-actors. I've had that experience. because I directed and I acted in a film that I made in Cambodia that came out in 2003. And, you know, we had some very experienced actors like Gerard Depardieu and James Caan and Stellan Skarsgård, very good actors. And then we had many people that were not professional actors, and you know, some of them had never even seen film before, you know. And they gave remarkably good performances, you know. And I believe that, you know, we are all actors, you know, in a way. And if they're directed well, then. And I worked with a guy who was a trial lawyer, and he was the #1 First Amendment lawyer in the United States. The First Amendment is like the freedom of speech and all that. And he played a judge, and it was with Kate Beckinsale and another actor, Alan Alda, and we had to do a scene. And he had all this dialogue because he was playing a judge, you know. And he was incredible because he would forget his lines and he would just make up new ones, and he was so good. And we just said, Jesus, you know, that's the kind of thing we want to be able to do, you know. And so, I don't know, I look at a lot of my early work and I'm very judgmental. A fully developed, realized human being. He wasn't just a, you know, I mean, a lot of films for young people, for kids at that time were very, they were just playing kids, you know. And that's why I became an actor. If it had been a different type of movie, I probably wouldn't have responded to it.
Well, when Pauline wrote this, it was in '82, and you were like 17, and you already had like 4 or 5 films.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing because I started very young, so I had a lot of learning experience there on the job. I guess the difficult part of it is that, you know, again, I was very young, so I was learning as I was working. And of course now, as I'm older and I look at my work and I go, well, you know, that was a long time ago. And, you know, of course, I'm very judgmental of that early work sometimes. But, you know, one of the things I've learned about working as an actor is that you cannot play a character if you're judging the character. You have to, like, surrender that.
And a couple of years after this, you did Rumblefish. You worked with Coppola on 2 films. What can you remember about working with him?
Well, I remember the audition process was painful because there were so many actors just crammed into this big room. And he released me early. He said, "You can go now." And I said, "Well, I didn't get this job, you know." And of course, then I got the call that I got the job. And that was on The Outsiders. And, you know, he didn't have any intentions of making Rumblefish until he was halfway through making The Outsiders. And he came to me and said, "Hey, you know, what do you think of this other book? You know, I'd like to do this as a film, and I'd like you to play a character." It's like, hello? Yeah, of course. And they're so different, the films, you know.
Yes,
they're so different. But one thing that was consistent with Francis, like, at that time, was he was always very into technology. And at that time, there was a lot, it wasn't like now, you know. He did a lot of video and green screen projection stuff. And I swear, when we did Rumblefish, we filmed the whole movie in the rehearsal in this hot gymnasium in Oklahoma. And I mean, I remember feeling like I was already exhausted by the time we were done with the rehearsal. But it was such a different experience than The Outsiders. The Outsiders is a big Technicolor movie. It was a different type of cast, although there were some people that were from one movie. One was in color, the other was in black and white, and the experiences on the film were that different. You know, the feeling was that different.
Yeah, I think he always mentions Rumblefish as like a personal film for him.
Yeah, he's said that it's his favorite film, you know, that it's his favorite film. And yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and it was very exciting. We were all very excited about doing it. And I remember when I was doing The Outsiders, Dennis Hopper visited the set, and you know, he worked with Francis on Apocalypse Now. And I was like 18 years old, but I went out drinking with Dennis. Maybe not such a good idea in hindsight. And Tony Dingman, who was like he was like Francis's like resident poet, a very good guy. And we went out drinking, and it was like, it just seemed like, okay, this is just going to happen. He's going to play the father, you know. And so that was the family: Mickey Rourke, Dennis Hopper. Not exactly, you know, a functioning, well-functioned family. But yeah, it was a great experience. And I remember, you know, Francis was very encouraging for improvisation, and which was a good thing mostly, except sometimes with Dennis Hopper. At that time, Dennis was totally out of control. But it was good. We had a good time making it.
Yeah, and Diane Lane is there in both films.
Yeah, Diane, yep. Yeah. Yes. And Sophia was in it. Coppola.
Yes. And I have to ask you about Cliff Ponsier from Citizen Dick.
Yes.
From
He's
Singles.
very popular here.
Yeah, it is.
Right,
It's a very
popular.
important character.
Yeah. Very popular. Yeah, well, the director, Cameron Crowe, came to me and said, hey, I'd like you to play this character. He said, hey, I'd love to do it, but I don't even remember the character in the script. And he said, oh, don't worry, we're going to fix it. We're going to make the character, we're going to make it better, and it's okay. And, you know, at the time, he said to me that this is like rock bands that aren't in New York and they're not in Los Angeles, they're like in the middle. And I didn't know much about that scene in Seattle. I didn't know much about the music scene there. But I remember, I remember that Cameron called me and said, listen, these guys are going to come visit you. These are the guys, you know, and it was Eddie Vedder, and it was all the guys from Pearl Jam. And they showed up in town. And we went out and got shit-faced, man. We went out, and we went out and got drunk, man. It was a good time. Of course, the next day, then I ran into Joe Strummer on the street. He said, let's go. And we're going to go. And we went out. And it was a crazy time. But those guys, yeah, I was very interested to get to Seattle and see what was happening.
And Cliff sort of became the face, the film face for that character, for the whole, the whole grunge thing.
Yeah, except everybody that saw me, there's a scene when my character is playing Hey Joe at Jimi Hendrix's gravesite. And Jimi Hendrix was from Seattle. And so I was playing it in the scene, and of course the sound was so bad. So every musician who saw it said, hey, somebody's got to redo that part because that sounds like shit. And so I think Paul Westerberg from The Replacements was the one who redid the guitar part.
Okay.
Because I can't play guitar. I play congas a little bit. But.
So yeah, when we're talking about music, maybe I heard that you were doing a film about Cuban music.
Yeah,
directing.
It's not about Cuba. It's about really one musician who. The story was that his name was El Gran Feove, which means the Great Feove, right? And I discovered this guy's music, and I found out he was still alive, and he was living in Mexico City. So I told a musician friend of mine, who always was in the habit of working with older musicians, I said, why don't you go make a record with this guy? And he did. And he said, well, why don't you come down and you can film it, And so I agreed to do that. I mean, I made a couple music videos, but I never made a documentary before. So, and that was in 1999. And so I went down there, and the guy this amazing, incredibly interesting Cuban, he was a scat singer, hadn't made a record in 20 years. And so the film is really about his experience of recording again after not having done it. And then we also retrace his footsteps. And he was part of a very important movement in Cuba that started in the late 40s called feeling. And the reason they called it feeling, the English word sentimiento in Spanish, was because they listened to a lot of American music. They listened to a lot of jazz and American songbook on records, because the black American soldiers, sailors who were in the harbor in Havana would sell them, you know, Ella Fitzgerald and Benny Goodman and these jazz records. So that was they were influenced by that music, and it started to, but they weren't recording artists. They were mostly songwriters who would create songs and have these things that they called descargas, which were jam sessions, and they started to call them descargas. And nobody thinks about the feeling movement as the creators of this. Anyway, it's a subject that, of course, I'm very interested in. But primarily the story is of this one guy and this experience that he had where he was brought back to life and making a record which he hadn't done for 20 years. And that experience and what that did and how that changed his life. And he was also at that time very old. So it was a very interesting time for an artist, because he had with him all this experience, and he also had the ability to still perform the way that he had throughout his whole life. But you knew that he wasn't going to be able to, because old age was right around the corner. And that was very interesting to see him knowing that he wasn't going to be able to do it very, very long. And it was a wonderful, great experience. But I didn't do anything with all of that footage that I filmed, really because I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it. And, but, my love of that music has always been, has always been really strong. And if I may just say, not so humbly, I'm very knowledgeable about that music, and it's a real passion for me.
Is music generally important?
Yeah, I think it has been very important for me in my life, always. I directed a film that I acted in, and I used all the music that I loved, but I used a lot of Cambodian pop music from the 60s. And, we couldn't get any clearance from this because we couldn't find any of the authors of this music, because they'd all been killed by the Khmer Rouge in the revolution there. But, I love music. And, that music last night that I saw, Marco, it's incredible. What an amazing, I mean, my God, were you there for that? It's amazing. And such beautiful brass band, the precision of those musicians and his scatting ability. It was such a unique, and I was, of course, very tired, but I didn't want to leave. And Amir said, "Hey, you're going to fall asleep. I'm going to take you back." I said, No, one more song. Well, it was incredible. I like the music from the Balkans. It's very interesting.
And directing?
Well, I'm an actor. That's what I do. I prefer, that's what I like to do, to collaborate and work with good filmmakers. And, that's the best experience you can have, is to help a filmmaker with their vision. But I do enjoy directing. I haven't done a lot. Directing a documentary is another beast altogether. And when I ran into Amir in Cuba, he said to me, "Oh, that's a very dangerous thing, documentaries, because there's so many ways you can go with the story, and to try to find a simple, you know, that's a different animal altogether, because you're kind of writing the story as you're editing. But I like storytelling. I think my strength is maybe with characters and with atmosphere, but I'm not so, you know, structurally in the story. I struggle with that, you know. You know, but I think one thing I think is very important is character logic. And you know, sometimes you work with filmmakers who are green, and they don't quite understand that, you know, that stories, the story is created by the actions of the people. And instead of, they come up with these schemes, these schematic ideas about, you know, and they all of a sudden the character's doing things that don't make sense to the character. And I'm always, you know, I think it's very important, character logic. And, you know, I mean, when I say character logic, I think it's that thing that it's not about, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. Character logic is, you know, when you open the paper and you say, why the hell would this person do that, you know, whatever it is. And if you look deeply, or not even that deeply, if you look at who that person is, you're going to understand very well why that person did what they did. You know, even if it doesn't make sense to you when you first read it, why would they do something like that, you know? And so, yeah.
Yeah, films tend to, especially mainstream ones, to become, you know, very formulaic and very structured. And you often wonder why do people do things that they do. It seems unnatural if it's not character-based.
Yeah, I found that experience. I only did one thing on television, and you know, that's where you really end up, because every day, every show, there's a new director coming in, and they bring you a script, and I found myself going, this is not, you know, this isn't going to work, you know. And you know, at the end of it, I did one season of the show, and I said, the producer, I called the producer. I said, hey, why don't you just kill me off, man? Kill the character, right? And he goes, yeah, but what about the next season? I said, hey, come on, one season at a time, because I want it out, you know. I mean, I think that the format, you know, in television is a good one, you know, because it's potentially there's so much creative potential, but it's not, it doesn't ever end up being that way. And the real beauty and the real poetry is in film. It's sitting here and watching something on the big screen.
Yeah, it tends, I guess there's a lot of potential. Someone said that, you know, television now opens the possibilities of the novel for movies.
I agree with that, yes.
But at the same time, you know, you said, you know, season 2, season 3, it could be made or become to be made for the wrong reasons, I guess.
Yeah, I think the best ones are where there is character logic is the primary thing, you know, like who gives a fuck what happens in the plot, you know? I want to know what the hell Tony Soprano's going to do, who's going to beat up next week, you know, or who's, you know, that's what people tune in for. They're not tuning in to find out when, you know, they leave the suitcase in the locker and, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I prefer movies because it's a lot quicker for us. You know, we get in and we get out, you know, whatever. But, yeah.
I guess you've been working a lot lately. I think 3 or 4 films came out in last year.
Yeah. No, I think I just did only one movie.
It came out.
I did the Lars von Trier movie that came out. And I scared everybody off. And then I had 3 other films that I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Lars and about the film.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, it's not a subject that I was especially interested in doing about serial killers or anything like that. But I really admired his films as a director, and that I felt like this was an opportunity to do some really good work. I liked the character, I liked the challenge of the project, and really it's about the filmmaker, you know. And he's very interesting director. Something very paradoxical about everything he does. I know it feels like with Lars, the rules don't apply to Lars, right? I mean, he makes movies about America. He's never been to the United States. You know, he doesn't. He's scared of traveling. But he told me one time he flew a helicopter. I don't know. But I liked working with him. And I remember when we were talking and we had some discussion and misunderstanding about the character on the phone, and we started to talk about it. And he said, you know what is very important is that when we're filming, that we stop everything and have this conversation. You know? And it's so different than any director would typically say, it's good that we're talking about this now so we don't have this problem when we get on the set. And Lars is very much the opposite. And there were things that I experienced, like we never rehearsed. And not one time did we rehearse, which is very unusual. You know, I've never been on a movie where we didn't rehearse one time. And the reason that he wanted to do that was because you're never going to get the first take again, right? The most difficult, challenging thing for me was that if I had to do something that was second nature to my character, like knowing how to open a door, because you live there, right? And the first time I'm opening the door is in the first take. But other than that, what I thought was terrific about it is it kept me in the moment. You know, I was very much in the moment because I didn't have time to think about, you know, my ideas about what I should do or how I should prepare. And, you know, that was sort of, you know, he asked me, he said, why don't you try trusting me? And I thought, this fucking guy's asking me to trust him with this movie. But you know what? I trust him because he's good with actors. I wouldn't say he's an actor's director, but he's really paying attention to what you're doing. And I think he makes the right choices. And his direction is very simple, you know. It was like 10% more, 170% more, he would say. No, he never said more. Basically, what I liked was he would say to me, you know, he'd go like that, or he'd say, you know, 30% less, or 180%. It was usually less with me, which is, by the way, I appreciate that. And because, you know, I appreciate the reduction, getting the performance down. And I understand a number. It's very simple. 30% less. Okay, I can.
Yeah, very straightforward.
Yeah, I'm not that good at math. So I'm not very good at math, and you know, I got it. You know. And one time he said, one actor said, "Oh, you were great," and he turned to Riley and he said, you know, a little bigger, and he looked at me and said, "You're fired." Well, he's got a very good sense of humor, and you know, the film. You know, I'm glad that I did it. I mean, it's not an easy film. You know, I understand why people might react the way they do.
I saw it as a film that he, you know, openly made about himself. There's even cuts of his previous films.
I don't think he's killed anybody yet.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, it's a great thing that with him, I guess, he makes extreme stuff, but, you know, he always takes responsibility for it.
Yeah, he said that to me. He said, you know, Lars, are you sure about this? And he goes, look, you can always blame me. I said, well, I'm going to. Don't you worry about that.